Welcome to the Best of MBS podcast, a collection of the best interviews hosted by Michael Bungay Stanier, best-selling author of The Coaching Habit and How to Begin. Today's interview is from the Coaching Habit podcast. Here's your host, MBS.
I am Michael Bungay Stanier. You're listening to the Coaching Habit podcast. This is where you will find the best strategies for leading yourself and others by tapping into the wisdom of thinkers, of leaders, of writers. We even throw an occasional coach or two. And my guest today is a great friend of mine, a longtime friend of Box of Crayons as well, Michael Leckie. He is currently the CLO for an idea called Digital Industrial within GE, with this kind of driving force that GE will be the platform for industrial digital, the industrial internet. But I met Michael Leckie 18 years ago now, or something ridiculous like that. In a training program with Edgar Schein. Regular readers and listeners will know that I reference Schein quite a lot. And Michael moved to Gartner, a big tech research company, and we ended up doing quite a lot of work and having quite a lot of fun together there at Gartner. So I'm always excited to talk to Michael Leckie, all the more so when we get to record it as a podcast. So hello, MJL. How are you doing?
MBS, I am fine today. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, BS, it's just not that great a combination of letters for a surname, but never mind. I'll move on with it. So here's how I want to jump in. I know some of your journey, but I'm curious to know what your focus is right now. As you know well, at Box of Crayons, we're talking about the difference between good work, your job description, and great work, the work that has more impact, the work that has more meaning. So what for you is great work these days?
Great question, because it continues to evolve, although there are, as you probably would predict and probably have in several of your books and themes around it. But for me, my great work has always centered around how do you make a space for people to a little more safely, a little more comfortably, maybe a little more boldly step into and really grow and change and transform. And so at GE right now, what we're really focusing on is what, the much vaunted digital transformation. But what's become really clear to me is there's so many definitions for that, but that really what it's about is individuals making real personal change and transformation that allows them to lead this type of change. And, I've really come to realize it's not about the program, it's about the person. And giving them the tools and the space and the awareness and helping kind of stoke the fires of the need to change. So I guess I'd say I'm still working on my great work around trying to help people find that place, but find it very specifically around some critical business needs right now.
So you're a kind of L&D geek like I am. And so you've been thinking about and wrestling with these whole challenges around change, how it is both a personal thing and a team thing, an organizational thing. And putting Box of Crayons work aside, should you have been going to mention it, who do you look to as kind of really interesting thinkers and writers in this particular space? Because it's such an important topic and there's a lot of not very good stuff out there. So I'm always keen to know what the really good stuff is. So who do you look to as being kind of an influential way of thinking or doing in this space?
Sure. And at least the first one I'll mention, I know that you also share an affinity for, because we went to their session together to learn about immunity to change. Right. And that would be Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy at Harvard School of Education.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think that the work that they've done, both around immunity to change and now most recently that they wrote about in an everyone culture, is really foundational, because it starts with the individual and their mindset. I think that mindset's more often associated with Carol Dweck, and I love her work. But I really like how Bob and Lisa make it pragmatic and help you dig in. The other thing recently that that really has got my attention was, I think it's Catherine Ludwig and Ed Hess wrote a book called Humility is the New Smart. And
I love that.
What I loved about it is that you see a title like that, you think, okay, this is going to be a good, soft and fluffy, L&DOD type of thing. And they immediately start out with a smart machine era and how artificial intelligence and machine learning is changing what has value and what doesn't, that knowledge becomes a commodity, but, the ability to influence and to guide and to lead is where the value is. And so they've really brought home the fact that it's no longer about knowing, it's about learning, and your ability to be able to learn and relearn with the pace of change. So I think that that's had their work's had a real profound impact on how I work with people, and especially anything around learning and development. It's no longer about here's what we can teach you. It's about how can we help you really learn and question and challenge yourself, which takes you right back to the Keegan and Leckie stuff, as they're also focused on how can you understand where it is that you trip yourself up or put your own boundaries in place. So those are the two that come to mind right now. Yeah.
And I like the connection also to Ed Schein's work. I mean, his last book was called Humble Inquiry, and that connection between humble and humility, very close. So two great resources there.
Yeah.
So let me take you back a little bit. You know, one of the quotes I say every podcast now, because I love it so, is inspiration is when your past suddenly makes sense. And as we get to where we've got to, and we look back, you know, the one way you can kind of make up that you always knew where you were going and this was always part of a plan. But for most of us, there have been these kind of crossroads moments where we've gone left instead of right, and it's made all the difference. So I'm curious to you, for the part of the journey that's taking you to this role about digital, about learning, about change at an organizational and an individual level, what have been one or two of those crossroad moments for you?
Well, you know, it's funny. I've kicked around for a long time, and I'll have to do this now because I was saying on your podcast before somebody else steals my idea. But I've toyed around with a concept I sort of call the know-nothing leader. And to me, it's about accessing, as Ed Schein would say, accessing your ignorance and just going ahead and stepping in with what you've got. And I think that one of the things that I find interesting about the place that I'm at, you know, when I got to Gartner, I joined leading HR for a number of businesses. And I ended up working in executive programs, which, as you know, is their CXO advisory business. And I ended up working with coaching and advising, C-level executives, especially chief information and chief digital officers, around the globe. I don't know anything particularly about that, or didn't when I started. And I'm not a techie, and I don't have that depth of knowledge. But what I did is I just kind of stepped in with what I knew, and I would say, hey, here's what I don't know. And I really started to learn that stepping into that place of unknowing could be valuable. And one of the most interesting moments I had was when I was talking to someone and where they were going was so far over my head. I mean, I didn't understand some of the words they were using. I'd heard them and didn't know what they meant.
Yeah.
All these terms. And I thought, okay, so what's valuable in this other than just the fact that I feel afraid and stupid? And I stopped for a minute and I thought, well, wait a minute. I work with executives all the time. And it's not that I'm an idiot. It's just I don't understand what they're saying because it's such inside baseball, as a friend of mine would say down here in the States. Yeah. And so I stopped him and I said, hey, I got to tell you, I don't really understand what you're talking about. And they sort of stopped and looked at me and I said, and I'm a fairly educated individual. So the question I have is, do you think there are people in your organization that are your peers or maybe even your boss that's feeling the same way when you talk to them? And they stopped and looked at me and the conversation broke open there. And we realized that this person really had been, in a sense, hiding behind what they knew and, staying in that place of comfort. And so, I guess one of those moments for me was just saying, step into places that scare you, step into the places where you think you're going to come out looking foolish. We talk about Ed Schein, the great thinkers. One of my favorite quotes is the great 20th century philosopher Cher, when she said that if you're not willing to look foolish, you'll never have the chance at greatness. So I guess I subscribe to that as well.
And I'm happy to say that I've seen you look foolish many, many times. So greatness is surely just around the corner for you, Michael.
For those of you listening, the planking episode never happened.
Yes. So look, let me ask you this. Speaking of planking, one of the questions I believe to be true as to those people I look to and admire are there people who've kind of done their own work. They continue to refine their sense of self, their sense of presence, their sense of emotional intelligence and self-knowledge. And for myself anyway, what I've come to realize is I tend to not have hundreds of lessons to learn, but just like a few lessons that I have to keep learning. So I'm wondering what for you is the hard lesson that you've had to learn or you've had to keep learning?
Oh, there's probably a few of them, but a couple that come to mind. One is just an aspect of me that I've had to learn to recognize is that I like to be liked.
Right.
So one of the things I need to do is not let that take place of me being effective, because sometimes to be effective, you have to disrupt, you have to push, you have to break some eggs or ruffle some feathers. By just being honest and caring, not in a way to be superior, but in a way that really shows that you love someone enough to tell them the truth as you see it. So
yeah,
I need to be aware of that and keep that balanced, and not go too far down that road.
I love that. I'm going to stop you there because
Yeah.
I want people to hear it, because for those of us who are trying to be coaches or to be more coach-like in the work that we do, this, I think, is such a big, recurrent, deep pattern. So I love that Michael is kind of copying to it and pointing to it, which is that the way it plays out for me anyway is I make up this story about how I'm protecting the other person. And then I'm like, who am I kidding here? I'm just protecting myself. And there's a way that you can sell the other person short by your own lack of courage to say the hard thing. So thanks, Michael. I'm really happy you said that.
Cool. You're welcome. And I thought we're talking about the other lessons I've learned. I guess one of them is that I can be a real in my head person.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a good vocabulary. I can fake it through a lot of really erudite sounding thoughts and come off scholarly. But the fact of the matter is that I've really had to learn that, from the head comes programs, but from the heart really comes the things that can go a bit viral. And as I've started to work, especially with large organizations, I mean, I got to GE, there's 300,000 people here, trying to roll out and scale a program, it became so esoteric and tool driven that by the time you scale it, you really haven't scaled much. And I started to realize that you really had to be open to leading with your heart, leading with honesty, and not knowing you couldn't control the outcome, but that you can't make things go viral through a program. It's just not part of the nature of it. You have to put it out there and experiment and see what sticks, and not knowing the outcome, which a lot of people don't like. And I don't like it because I like to know that something I do is going to work. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't look that smart. Yeah. But it really has helped me to go ahead and look foolish.
Well, I've just had this insight with a report that we're writing at the moment for Box of Crayons, and it has just taken us 6 different cycles to get this thing even close to being good enough. And it's been so painful, but there's just been part of the learning again for me, which is it takes 6 cycles or something like it to take something from being okay to actually going, well, this is beginning to kind of hum with possibilities here. So yeah, there's something about what it takes to do the work to take it from that first okay to really being something that's going to have the impact that we all dream of.
Yeah, I think so. And you kind of have to, as part of the non-controlling or letting go, you have to give it away. And I think, it kind of comes back to what we talked about earlier. Another influence, I got to know Adam Grant through work that I did with Gartner and beyond that. And I've really just, embraced what he talks about when it comes to giving. And to me, you just can't, I've never been able to give so much that it hurts. Now, I understand that you need to be smart about it. A lot of great giving is in connecting people and putting things together, not just taking all your time for others. But the more that I continue to give and put things out there, those are the things that take off once I let go of them. And that can be the hard thing, is to, let that baby go out into the world and see what happens.
So as the final question I want to ask you as part of this part of the interview, and people listening will know that for every guest I have, we actually do 3 interviews. We do this main one, which is a longer one. We do a shorter one, which is about the guest's favorite question. And then we do a kind of inner circle one where we talk about the 2 sources of wisdom that guest relies on, which you have to be signed up for our newsletter for to get access to. But this is the last question for the main interview. And it's about this, Michael, in your role as a leader and as somebody who has coaching as part of your leadership repertoire, what's a favorite tool or a process or a model that you go to and just rely on, lean into, just where you go, man, this one almost never fails. I've got it as a well-used tool in my repertoire. Do you have one of something like that?
Well, and certainly you'll know for the years we've worked together, the kind of questions that are in the coaching habit and the programs that Box of Crayons runs are deeply ingrained in me. But if I think about the one that really that I really go to probably the most often, it comes out of your work as well as the work of others. And I think it's the question around, what do you want? I mean, for me, the how can I help, but also the what do you want? And there's so many things that just come down to that. And it's a question that you can ask and ask again. And we've talked about this a number of times. The first time you ask the question, the answer you get is just usually garbage. It's so high level or so, easy to say. But if you truly get down to what do you really, really want, a lot can be revealed. And it's a tough question to answer, but it's one that I definitely will use on a regular basis to deepen understanding, deepen relationship, and try to truly be helpful to someone.
And for me, that question is, kind of connecting us back to humility and groundedness and all of that stuff that we talked about right at the start of the conversation. I think this question is wonderful to ask other people, but really wonderful to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Particularly, when you're confused or discombobulated, or when a relationship's slightly off, or when you're feeling, anything other than a best version of yourself, rather than looking externally and going, what's going on here? Part of it just may be going, well, look, here's the data of the situation. Here are the facts. Knowing that to be true, what do I want here? And for me, it's often such a relieving insight, which is like, oh, here's the thing. I want to say this, or I want this to be different. And it just takes you to where the real issue is. And once you see the real issue, you have the choice to actually start doing something about it. So yeah, the fourth book in the Coaching Habit book is what do you want? And we call it the foundation question for that very reason that you're pointing to.
Yeah. And it's one thing I'd add to that is it's a great question to ask yourself, and it's a really hard question to answer well for yourself. I mean, and just a couple of weeks ago, I came up, spent some time with you and our other co-conspirator, Mark Bowden, up there in Toronto,
Yep.
because there's something I was wrestling with. And that was what it was. I said, look, guys, it's worth it for me to take the time, come up here, sit down, and let's talk through what do I want with people who care about me and are willing to be honest, pushing me and saying, is that what you really want? Because doing that, I got real clarity. And once the clarity was there, man, the action just followed.
Yeah.
I know exactly what needs to be done. It's that moment of when you see what you need to do, then you can get there. But when you don't quite see it, you don't know what you really want, you'll stumble around and waste an incredible amount of energy. So it's worth engaging others to find out what you want, I think.
I love it. So, Michael, you are one of 300,000 people at GE. For people who are authors and kind of external people like that, we ask them to say, how do we find you on the web? Do you want people to be able to find you, or would you prefer to stay kind of mysterious and enigmatic?
No, absolutely. I want them to be able to find me. So on Twitter, you can find me at Leckie Michael J, Leckie Michael J. And on LinkedIn at MJ Leckie, you can find me quite easily. I'm open, and reach out to me at any time. I love to connect with people. I've found that making those connections with people I've never met have been some of the most fruitful, and have led to long-standing relationships. So if something I've said here is useful, people should feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Michael, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this Best of MBS interview. Want more great content? Head to mbs.works. There you'll find MBS's new podcast, 2 Pages. You can learn about his best-selling books, and you can join the newsletter. That's mbs.works.